Hello and welcome everybody to Sound of the Loons, presented by Allina Health Orthopedics. And today I have the honor and the privilege to be joined by the head coach and manager of Minnesota United, Adrian Heath. A little bit more sun on the face, a little bit of vitamin D. You look like, I'm like fluorescent white back here in Minnesota, but you look like you're glowing a little bit from your couple trips.
Well, we had 18 days down in Florida, then we were back for a week in the snow and the cold, and then we ended up down in Palm Springs. So in terms of the travel, it's been quite nice. I've got to be honest, Kyndra. A little bit too long, if I'm being perfectly honest. Long time for the players to be away from family, and But hey, we got to do some work, and obviously we have to get out of the dome. We have to get out of indoors playing on artificial surfaces. And as I say, it was a really welcome break. I've got to say, there wasn't too much break, by the way. It was a lot of 2 and 3 a days, plenty of games. So no, it was a nice place to go. First time I've been to Palm Springs.
I was going to say, I was talking to Mark Watson last week, kind of when he just arrived at Coachella, and talking about the facilities and what a difference that makes for you guys at preseason. And Portland, I mean, they put on a great tournament too, but it's just different when you have all those fields right in the same place. You've got the training facilities, the hotels are close by, there's things to walk to. So if you are going to be away from your family, away from home, and gone for that extended period of time, not only was the competition great, but the facilities were phenomenal.
Yeah, and it's like for the players, Kyndra, the facilities are more important than the hotel and everything, because that's where you spend most of your days. It's a minimum of 2 a day. Sometimes it's 3 sessions a day, and playing on really good surfaces, which they were. We were at the Polo place there, and incredible facilities. It's the first time, as I say, I've been. Hotel was great. Facilities were good. 12 teams, I think, was there. So it gives you an opportunity to catch up with some of the other coaches, watch a few of the other teams in play, see what you think they are at this moment in time. So no, it was a really, really good, well-organized tournament, and one that we'll probably look at again, I would think.
And before we dive into really a deep dive into what you felt like you got out of preseason, what you went in looking for, and then what you felt like you got out of it, of course, health and wellness is always top of mind. But in general, you have a plan, you have a game plan, you have a thought process going into the 2023 season, players that are going to be available. So when you find out and you hear that Emmanuel Reynoso has still not joined preseason, what is the best way for people to how do you do that? How do you deal with that as a coach from a tactical, technical, emotional, physical standpoint, mentality of this group?
Yeah. So as we said, it's the elephant in the room at the minute. Every time I do an interview, I'm wondering when it's going to crop up. So we've started straight from the off, Kyndra. No, it's very disappointing. I'd be lying if I didn't say it was. Everybody knows what an integral part of our team Ray is, not just on the field. You've met him loads of times. He's a really sweet kid, and we've missed having him around. But more importantly, I think his teammates have. We a lot of the players that we've brought in over the last couple of years have been to assist and help Ray for us to get him in his best spot, which is in and around the penalty area. And last year he had his best year in terms of productivity. Was it 11 goals and 10 assists? A little bit down on his assists, but 11 goals, which when you look at what he played, it's like 1 and 3 for a number 10. That's pretty good. So it would be churlish of me to say that we're not going to miss him, because we are. We haven't given up hope of him coming back. It's funny that today he's made contact with a couple of people today, which I think is a real positive. So, yeah, we want him back sooner rather than later, because, as I say, he's such an important piece. Interestingly, in Coachella, the one question that everybody asked me, and it was always the coach of the opposition, when's Ray back? What's Ray doing? So, it's not just us who's obviously keeping a close eye on what's going on. I think a lot of people within the league are. Obviously, as I say, we've got to decide what we do. Do we try and stick with the normal formation, the 4-2-3-1, and maybe put Robin Lode in there? or do we go a different way? Play 3 in midfield and play 3 a little bit higher up the field. So we've got a few choices. We've sort of tinkered with 3-5-2 behind closed doors as well. So it's nothing that we haven't done before. But no, we're going to certainly miss him, because as anybody does, if Carlos Vela doesn't play for the LA, they miss him. If Rui Diaz doesn't play for Seattle, they miss him. And we're no different. Hopefully the loss won't be felt too strongly. We've got good players and we've got, such an intelligent footballer in Robin Lod, who we know can play virtually anywhere on the field. So, we've got a few decisions to make before the opener in Dallas.
Well, and I think that's such a great point. I mean, I'm sure some of those coaches are asking you that because you guys are all concerned about him just as a human being. You just want to make sure that everything is first and foremost that he's in a good spot. And then secondly, it's from a footballing soccer perspective. And and I'm sure they're thinking when we face Minnesota United, is Ray going to be there or not? But I think for you guys, you hit the nail on the head in the sense that Robin proved so instrumental last season, whether he was sitting behind Ray or he was filling that number 10 void. So having some flexibility, you've got Hassani Dotson hopefully coming back in the mix, depending on how healthy and how good he's feeling.
And Kervin's come back looking like he started last year. He had that really high ankle sprain last year and he never felt comfortable for the second half of the season. He missed quite a lot of training. We could get him back for the next game, but he didn't feel sharp. And he's come back looking really, really like his old self, like the beginning of last year when he come in and made such an impact very, very early on. So, we have got midfield players. As I say, it's like having a new signing, having a Sani back. Obviously, we got bigger hopes for Josie Frazali's this year as well. So we have got bodies in there. So, that might soften the blow a little bit, knowing that we can put Robin a little bit higher up and maybe Robin in a wider area, try and compensate for the goals that we might lose from Ray.
Well, and I mean, Robin spent the time at the forward position in the past too. I mean, he's really been one of those sort of Renaissance men that can fill in elsewhere, but also with the depth and the quality you guys have in the wide spaces, with Bongi coming back now in his second full, season, where does Mender fit in the attacking position? So it's not like if you had to put Robin in the middle, you necessarily are losing something on the outsides. It just gives a different look.
Well, the one sort of question I would have, and this is something we've spoke to the players about, is are we going to get enough goals? Because before every season, you have to look and say, is the 50 goals here? Is the 55? Wherever your number is. So one or two are going to have to step up. We spoke about, Bongi last year. He's come back, looks really strong, looks really quick. He's had a really good preseason. But he's got to get between that 7 and 12, 13 range. Now, if we can get him to do that and Fraga gets his normal quota, then Robin, and then you get your centre forward, you're suddenly looking around 50-odd goals. And that's certainly what we're going to need. But so it's a big year for some of them younger guys. Bongi showed a lot of promise last year. Mendes settled now. He knows where he's coming. His wife's here. His child's here. So, there's a lot of other things that go into it. We're still hoping to add players. The window's still open. We're a lot closer on one of the players we've been looking at. So with this group, we're hoping that there's an added couple of other players, certainly before the deadline ends.
Yeah, and you talk about sort of bolstering. I know going into preseason, you were pretty high on Cameron Dunbar. He was a young player that you got from LA Galaxy that not only just his ability on the pitch, but even the intellectual reading the game. He wanted all the tape of your games last season to watch them. How has he come through the rest of preseason for you?
He's done terrific. He's a really nice kid, first and foremost, really good professional. He wants to do well. And that might sound a bit strange to some people, but there's a lot of players who just go and play and, they carry on with next day, they get up and play again. This kid wants to get better. He wants to look at video. He wants us to analyze it. He wants us to critique him, and he wants to get better. And as I said to my staff, we've got probably 11 players, I think, under the age of 22 in and around the squad now. Our job is to get them from promising young players to experienced MLS players. And that's going to be the challenge for us as a coaching staff. We have to work hard with these younger guys to make them better. That has to be the aim.
Well, especially now when you guys have this, not just MLS Next, but you've added now age groups in the academy. And I talked to Wado a little bit about that last week, what that does for you guys and sort of the talent pool and developing it, not just up to 15s now, 16, 17, 18, 19, whatever that might be, at least like in and around the same facility. What does that do for you guys?
Well, I think, we had some sort of criticism early on about they don't treat the academy the way that they should, and I sort of quickly shot that down. And if we could have 10 kids from Minnesota playing for me, I would do it in a heartbeat. That would be the dream for every club. But unfortunately, the harsh reality of that isn't that. And at this moment, we're in the beginning of hopefully putting a really good program together. Amos is working really, really hard with the coaching staff there. We've been pleasantly surprised at the level of talent that's out there locally. Carlos Lederman came and played preseason with us and did terrifically well for a young 17-year-old kid. We think he's got a future, Jesse Kahn, one of the younger kids in the 18 years of age from Trinidad. He was in the academy. Now he's with the second team. So there's talent down there. Devon Paddleford, we got Fred Emmings. So there's one or two kids, little green shoots coming through. So, we've got to keep working at it. We've got to keep investing in it. We've got to keep working and coaching these guys really hard. And then we have to give them an opportunity. It's all right having players, but they have to think there's a light at the end of the tunnel, which would be playing in our first team. So we've tried to integrate them in preseason. We took 4 or 5 of them with us and they did really well. So we're pleased with that side of the club. It's not where we want it to be, but it is something that we are really looking forward to and actually looking forward to developing more.
And when you look at some of the other signings, we talked about them at the beginning, and now that they've been in, they've gotten some time, but specifically in Miguel Tapias, what has that signing meant for you guys? And being able to bring him in now, knowing how that venture has kind of been to get him and acquire him.
Well, I don't want to go say too much too early, but to say he's been terrific in preseason would be an understatement. He's been absolutely unbelievable. Experienced, knowledgeable, just gets the game. He's been at Pachuca since he was 12. He's had a really good grounding. He's had a really good formation. Just gets the game like a veteran, experienced player. Knows when to bump players, knows when to drop off, knows when to try to pinch it. But the big thing for us is he's got such a cultured left foot that once we get down that side now, we've got somebody who can bring it out. And that was something that we lost when Dabasi went down, because it is a lot more difficult for a right footer playing on the left-hand side. You're always playing across yourself, whereas, left footer naturally opens himself up and can come out that side. And that's been a big, big plus for us in pre-season. Our ability to play the ball out from the back has gone up markedly than it was at the back end of last year. And that's basically down to his left foot.
So talking about that back line and sort of extending on that thought process, you did bring in a couple of veterans as well. We've talked about Daniil Henry before. When he first joined, he was one of the first podcasts I did, but and Marquez as well. So when you look at this roster, even with Dabasi still coming back from his injury and not really maybe for certain timetable with a ruptured quad that he suffered towards the end of last year, how do you feel about the back line and not just the depth and the ability, but the chemistry, which we all know can be incredibly important?
Yeah, I think also that, we signed Zarek Valentin, who's been in the game an awful long time. And obviously Cam Knowles, who looks after the second team, and Sean McCauley, they worked with him in Portland, and everything they said about him, but what was said on the cover was actually there to see, because he's really, really good professional, really positive influence, good talker. Makes everybody accountable, tells everybody how lucky we are to be in this profession and still doing it after all these years. So he's come in and done terrific. Mikel Marquez is obviously a really young player and one for the future. 21 years of age, super athletic player, really good on the ball. Got to work a little bit with him with his positioning. DJ, is he going to take the next step forward? He proved last year, he could handle it. Now, if he wants to be consistently and keep Zarek from getting that number 2 shirt, now he has to take it on another level and be consistent and do the things he's good at. Yeah, so the back, hopefully Dabasi comes back this year, and that'll be an embarrassment to Richie's then, and that sort of centre half position. But no, I've been pleased with him, and Dane's been really, really good with his feet. We've been working on that. I think he's better at playing out the back now than he has been. So yeah, it's been a results wise, I think, been mixed bag. But as I said to you before we even went to Florida, the most important thing for us is getting everybody physically and mentally prepared for the opening day in Dallas. And I think that's where we are. Obviously, the one wrinkle has been that Ray's not here, but the rest of the group have worked really, really hard. We've tried 2 or 3 different formations, so we can be flexible. So yeah, like any season, I'm like Kyndra, my glass is always half full. I'm looking forward to it. I see everybody thinks we won't make the playoffs, but that was the last 4 years as well, and that we proved them wrong, and hopefully we're going to prove them wrong again this time.
Well, and we know that with the amount of games that you guys are going to be playing with Leagues Cup thrown in the mix as well. I mean, thank goodness they decided to take a month off of regular MLS so you guys could do the Leagues Cup, and you weren't trying to handle that too, but you have US Open Cup in the mix. So the quality of the depth is so important. Do you feel like you're in a good spot with the left back position with Kamar, really maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, the only maybe true left back, or do you think Tapias could do that if he needed to?
He has done it in the past.
Padelford?
Yeah, Padelford's there. Mickey Tapias has played there for Pachuca in the La Liga MX. We've got DJ. He went and played there a few times last year. Zerik has played there in the past. No, we feel as though we've got a pretty rounded bunch. We've got people who can cover in a few positions. Obviously, Tapias was a big one for us because now, we've got Mikel Marquez and Brent Coleman sitting there. So we feel as though we've got enough depth in most of the places. I still feel we're probably too short, and we are hopeful. I'm confident that before the transfer deadline, we'll have at least 2 more players in. Hopefully, one in an attacking position and maybe one in a midfield position. And if we were to do that, and I'm hopeful that Ray will be back shortly, then I'll be really pleased with the group.
A couple of players we didn't even hit on because you kind of feel like they're going to just show up and you know what to expect from them, but a Michael Boxall, a Will Trapp, and then also just hit briefly on your hopes and sort of thoughts for Luis Samaria. I just had a brain fart there on what you expect from him this season.
Well, I think that, Luis, by his own admission, started slowly last year. If we can get him start the season, hit the ground running like he had in that purple patch where we lost, 1-13 during the middle of the year, and he started score goals. He actually got sort of 9-27 starts, so it's 1-3. Elite is 1-2. So, he probably did a little bit better than some people thought. So yeah, we need to get Luis hit the ground running. We're expecting more from Mender. We think he will improve. The other 2 you mentioned, I don't really need to speak to you about him because you're smiling there. You know exactly what they are. Michael Boxall, ultimate professional, same as Will Trapp. What you see is what you get every single day. Really positive influences. They look after themselves. They're really conscientious professionals. They want the best for the club. They want the best for the teammates. So there's 2, Kyndra, I don't have to worry about during the off season.
When you look at what you wanted to accomplish in preseason and then how you wrapped it up, and you're almost done here. I mean, but this is more like match day minus 2 or 3 because you're actually going into opening day on the 25th back at Dallas. But did you check all the boxes that you wanted to check and what you wanted to see? Of course, the first is getting fit, getting healthy, just getting the chemistry of the group together. But then by the end of it, did you feel like you guys were in a good spot?
If I was being ultra critical, and I said this to the guys, from our defensive third to the attacking third, it's been excellent. We've kept the ball well, really good continuity play. We've managed to break the lines really, really consistently. We haven't had enough final ball in the final third. And ultimately, that's, how important it is in the final third. People always say it to me when they meet me. One of my favorite sayings, goals change games. When you get them opportunities, you have to take them. And if there's one disappointing piece has been preseason, I don't think we've made enough use of the ball in the final third. That has to change. I spoke about that earlier on about we're going to need a certain amount of goals. And for have a certain amount of goals, you need good final ball, good decision making, good finishing. And I don't think we did a good enough job in that preseason. It's a work in progress, but we have to keep working at that.
It's crazy and you've seen this in your day, you've spent time, you know exactly what that means when you have a goal scorer, just someone that regardless of the situation, whatever the game calls for, there's always that thought that this individual is going to come through. So is that what you're trying to instill? Is it like a hunger? Is it a confidence? Is it the final ball? Is it the finishing? Is it a combination of all?
A little bit of all of that, but what I don't want to do, I don't want to start putting pressure under the players early on, because when you start overthinking it and start getting anxious and start snatching at chances and, just be instinctive, do what the natural flow of the game comes with you. It's something I've spoke to Bongi about. We looked at all Bongi's chances last year. He could have easily had double figures last year for the amount of good opportunities. But the more pressure you put under yourself to try and be a goal scorer, the more you get a little bit apprehensive when it doesn't come, and then you get a little bit anxious in front of goal, and you start overthinking it, start taking too much time to be too deliberate. That doesn't work. You've just got to keep giving him confidence. And as I said to the guys, the best bit of confidence I can give you is by selecting you. I'm trusting you that you're going to come through this and start scoring goals. But, that's an area of the field that I wouldn't say concerns me, but I think it's an area that we have to get right if we want to achieve what we want to achieve.
And last but not least, the games are the fun part, right? That's what all the work goes into. The games are the fun part when they can just go out and play. What do you see against FC Dallas coming up in a rematch of the playoffs last season? What do you see from FC Dallas?
Well, as I'm talking to you, I'm looking at my board, and it's got Ferreira centre forward, it's got Areola wide right, Velasco wide left, Pomlico, Leggett. It's a pretty formidable front five. What we got there: Argentinian international, 2 US internationals, 2 US under 23s. Yeah, it's going to be tough. They've got good players, but we proved in the last game of the season, the playoff game, it went to penalties. They couldn't break us down. And on the night, I was a bit disappointed because I thought we had the better chances on the night. Hey, we know it's not going to be easy. Never is there. The weather's going to help us because it's normally about 150 degrees normally when we get there. It seems that way anyway. So the weather's going to be a bit more bearable. But no, if we play well, keep a good defensive base and shape, and make the most of our counter-attacking opportunities, we can cause them problems.
I lied. I have one more. Western Conference. Anybody that stood out to you this offseason? Anybody that that you think is, the parity in this league is ridiculous. But...
Yeah, I think we played San Jose, and they've got a completely new way of playing, and Lucci's obviously working really hard on that. They will be better. I went through this with Bill Maguire the other day. He wanted a rundown of every team, so it's pretty fresh.
No,
yeah,
stop.
It's pretty fresh in my mind, Kyndra. I think that Seattle will be better because obviously Rui Diaz has missed a lot of games, and João Paulo's back. Portland missed the playoffs once, so go and spend 10 million on a number 10, and I've got 10 million waiting for a centre forward. So they're going to be better. They didn't make it last year. I think as always, it's going to be really, really competitive. It'll probably go down to the last few games again. And, obviously the new format came out today, so you've got a bit more opportunity with a playing game. But, hey, it doesn't get any easier, that's for sure. But I'm always confident that if we keep our best players fit and get them on the field, then we'll be organised enough to be competitive, and that will be the aim.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Adrian. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you got a busy schedule. You can keep looking at that board up there, and feel free to give me any inside information.
Hey, and I hope it goes well for you and your new job. Huh?
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay,
thanks, Adrian. Have a great day. See you.
Anytime. Cheers.
Stay tuned. Second segment coming up right here on Sound of the Loons. Andy Greder joins me from the St. Paul Pioneer Press. When injury takes you out of the game, it's time for your team to step up. At Allina Health Orthopedics, you'll get expert care backed by a whole health system of providers. With records, test results, and care team, you are always close to the care you need. Schedule now at allinahealth.org/ortho. Hey, everybody, welcome back. Segment 2 of Sound of the Loons. I am Kyndra D. St. Alvin. I don't even think I said that in the first segment. I always kind of forget that part. But the more important piece is that I'm joined by Andy Greder of the St. Paul Pioneer Press, the one and the only beat reporter. I shouldn't say one and only because then we're slighting Jerry Zagoda, but I mean the one and the only for the Pioneer Press, beat reporter for Minnesota United. Man, I've had the honor and the privilege to stand alongside you at many a training session over the last 6 seasons. And you just said to me, I haven't seen you at training. And I was like, I don't have to be at training every day now, because I am used to seeing you out there every single day. Because you are the one that gets the ins and the outs and all the information. So it's good to chat with you heading into opening day, which is February 25th for Minnesota United.
Yeah, Kyndra, thanks for having me on. I've been listening to the podcast for a long time, so it's great to be a guest on it. And yeah, if we can't catch up on a kind of chilly sports hall Tuesday, we can do it here in the cozy confines of our own homes.
Exactly. We're either, making that little trek from the sports hall to the dome. And then once the dome gets taken down, I mean, we did have some nice grass, warm, sunny days, for those, sort of 3 months up at Blaine. But either way, it is nice to catch up, because I do want to get your take, your perspective on, I mean, we can walk it back to 2022, because I didn't even get to talk to you after that. And then we went right into the, final, and then you got the World Cup, and then you've got holidays, and then, you're taking a couple of vacations, as you should do in the window of time that you can do. So what was sort of your thought process on the wrap up of 2022, and then how this team was sort of looking heading into 2023 from your vantage point?
Yeah, like every supporter knows, it was a very rough stretch towards the end of last year. So just to kind of get into the playoffs, get on proper footing, and make it, I think, was an accomplishment. I think being the only team in the Western Conference that have done it 4 years in a row is something to really appreciate when you look at where this current team is and kind of the uphill battle that they'll have to try to do it for a 5th time. But just to kind of improve in their play at the end of the regular season, get into the playoffs, have an eventful, entertaining first round playoff matchup, a game that they felt player wise that they played really well in, and were disappointed to not, win in PKs like they just came up just short. And we talked to Dane about it today, because obviously they play FC Dallas on Saturday, so there's going to be a lot of callbacks to the playoff matchup. And Dane was like, I regret not being able to save one, because he's got such a great track record of stopping PKs. So he was expectant to at least get one. And if he gets one and maybe Will makes his, then things are reversed and they're advancing in the playoffs. And obviously the margins are so small when it gets to the playoffs that those kinds of things could flip on a knife's edge, and it could have been a difference. So I think it was, it was a successful year, but I don't think it was, an overly successful year, because we've seen this team go to the Western Conference final before. We've seen this team advance and go on a run and string results together. And I think that's kind of the expectation with this team, is to not just make the playoffs, but get a home game and try and go on a run. So the fact that they came up short in that category, I think, was disappointing at the end of the day. But like I said, kind of bittersweet, because there were the positives of being the only team in the West to having done that. Now looking forward to this year, I think, they really running it back with the same group for the most part, right? I think Mickey Tapias is the number one guy that they brought in, a center back, a 25, 26-year-old from Liga MX who played at Pachuca, who's, I think, going to be a starter on opening day, is really the only new piece that they have at this point. And you take Emmanuel Reynoso out of the equation for the time being, and you really look at, okay, is this team going to have enough to really push on and make it for a 5th time? It sounds like there's some additions in the works, but for the most part, the core of this team is the same, and they're hoping to kind of raise the level for some guys and hopefully get Ray in the building and go from there.
Well, and I think that's such a good point, because when you look at FC Dallas's roster and lineup, and I just did their preseason game against Houston over the weekend. I mean, it is almost identical. Take out Matt Hedges, and then maybe an injury or a plug and play here and there until they get some other guys fit and healthy. So they're going to be the formidable group that you saw last season. But the other thing with Minnesota United, and correct me if I'm wrong, and you've seen this time and time again with this league, is not just having the same guys back, but second seasons for guys like Bongokuhle Hlongwane, for Mender Garcia, who was only here half of a season. And, these guys that can just feel more comfortable, and Kervin Arriaga, who we forget was only here just last year. So especially these internationals that come in, they're playing in a new country, and how they kind of settle in. They understand what to expect, the travel, the chemistry, the preseason. So it's like you're getting a new crop in the sense that it's their second year round. So they might feel a little bit more comfortable where they're at.
Yeah, no doubt. I think, especially if you're coming from Colombia, or if you're coming from South Africa or Honduras, like you mentioned, there's a lot of culture shock that comes with that. You can have your Latino, buddies there, but at the same time, it can be difficult just, knowing that you're in it, like you said, all the different variables that are a part of it. So once you're settled, I think the expectation level certainly rises, especially for a guy like Mender, who comes in on a DP contract, who was only here, like you said, for half a year, where Bongi and Kervin were here for a longer period and have kind of a longer runway to get kind of off the ground. Mender, I think, is one that I think people are expecting to see more from this year, especially given the fact that, like I said, he's a DP type player. And you talk about kind of the same core, Hassani Dotson. I mean, obviously he was lost in April and he's coming back strong. So he's kind of under the weather right now. It sounds like he's got an illness, and we'll see how severe that is for Saturday. But another player that while we talk about the same core, it's never always the same. And with getting a midfielder back of Hassani's caliber and getting a guy that is versatile as him, given some of the moving pieces on the roster, is certainly a welcome sign if he's able to play early in February or in March.
Speaking of versatility and the absence currently, at least, of Emmanuel Reynoso, and sort of the unknown factor of when he comes back, if he comes back, how he comes back from a fitness, physicality standpoint, and even where he may be at mentally and emotionally. I mean, we talk about the importance of every one of these guys as a human first. And as much as we like from the outside sometimes, and people in the Twitter sphere, to criticize players, people, franchises, clubs, whatever, they're all humans first at the end of the day, and you never know what's going on in people's lives. So let's say he doesn't come back, or at least he's not back right now, and we know he's not going to land tomorrow and play on Saturday.
Right.
The versatility of a player like Robin Lod has been almost, you can't even really put a price tag on that because of his willingness, A, to do it, and B, the quality in which he does it. Have you noticed that amongst the group either? That, of course, they all want Ray back. He makes the team better for sure. But the security of knowing you have a player like Robin that can play the way he does.
Yeah, no doubt. I think they're really kind of falling back on that right now. And we saw it last year when he came from a right winger position into deep lying midfield player type role, when, they had all those injuries like we talked about in midfield with Hassani, and I think Will and Kervin and all those guys, Joseph, all those guys were dealing with injuries last year. So they needed Robin to step into a different role. And it was almost like they got better in that spot, because I think you saw a deep lying connector, a deep lying playmaker in Robin, a guy who's, very calm on the ball. The moment's not too big for him. He has the amount of I think that's maybe what surprised me when he was in the midfield role, is the physicality that he was able to bring to it as well. Like you don't really expect it from him, and then he brings it in that spot, and you're like, oh, okay, he can do this as well. And I just think he's quality kind of through and through. And like you said, the willingness to do it. Boxy has said a few times that, maybe he doesn't want to do it, but he'll do it, because I think he's a good soldier. Like we talked about kind of his offseason last year, and he was in Finland doing military training. So he's literally has a military background of kind of the yes sir, no sir. And that's kind of the mentality that he brings to this spot. And I think, having him as kind of a number 10 type role is going to be key for this team. It sounds like most of preseason has been in a 4-3-3 type of setup. So I think they like the fact that Boxy in particular said that he likes more people behind the ball. It feels like they've got more continuity and stability, and Robin kind of helps with that. Obviously, maybe in front of the ball more, just given his advanced spot in the field. But, I think that having two guys behind is helpful. And I think you'll see a little tweaks in shape. And I think that it's been a work in progress, because we haven't seen a lot of goals, especially in California. They only scored 1 goal in open play in 3 games. And I think some of the chances were lacking. And that's what Adrian talked about today. I'm sure he talked about it with you, but he talked about it after training. Is he likes where they were between the boxes. He likes what they saw defensively. It feels like he's falling in love with Mickey Tapias from what I'm gathering. And he needs more in the final third. He needs that to increase, and that's something that we've talked about a lot with this team, and it's a recurring theme right now.
Yeah, and I think that's such a delicate balance, and Adrian did mention that, but you don't want to put pressure on the guys, but you also know that you brought certain guys in to be goal scorers, and there's other teams that you look at, and, I'm sure Adrian has played on and been a part of in the past where there's certain guys you just can rely on. When you need that goal, you know who you're going to, or that they're going to come through. And we've seen that with other MLS teams, and that sometimes Minnesota United has struggled to find that consistently. And sometimes when they did find it consistently, it was when maybe Robin was even playing more as the number 9. But again, it goes back to you move him from that wide position more central, even when he was playing the 10 or the 8 last year, and you lost his goal scoring ability from the right-hand side. So that means Bongi has to step up. Mender's got to have a good year in his second year. Luis Amarilla, I think, is better when he's not pressing and he just is free-flowing and confident and not forcing it. So it's finding that balance of the guys have to be confident. I feel a little bit of pressure is good, but not, you're not shriveling up because of the pressure, and trying to find that delicate balance.
Yeah, for sure. And Franco Fragapane in the mix as well. If he can get half a dozen goals, that obviously raises the level. And if he's able to help create. Yeah, I mean, I remember, probably one of the best goals last year was when Ray and Luis combined, and kind of Luis had the kind of that karate kick kind of a assist, right, where he's kind of creating as well. And I think that's when, like you said, I think that's probably when he's at his best, when he's not as much as the focal point as part of the continuity piece in that group, in that attack. And I think fans probably get a little frustrated with how much they cross the ball and are reliant on that and don't do as much centrally. And I think they need to try to be cautious of falling into that again here this year without Ray in the middle, at least at the start, to not be over reliant on kind of, swinging it wide and banging in crosses, because that's maybe not the best formula to score a goal. So they need to try to find other ways to do it, and continuity play with the pieces that you mentioned can go a long way to help that.
Yeah, I know. And we've talked a little bit multiple times about the depth of this team now, and where you're finding the depth and adding the pieces. Midfield looks pretty solid right now when you look at the rotation that they can have and that they can use, and the outside pieces. Cameron Dunbar, a lot of people have spoken really highly about since he's come in, the attacking pieces. But then the back line, there was some question marks because of Debasi when he went out last year. I mean, clearly there was a drop in the quality, and that's not a knock on Brent Coleman. That's just, I think it emphasizes the importance of the chemistry of the back line and the 2 center backs in particular. And it took Brent just a couple games to really find his footing and feel good about where he was at. But then they have brought in some additional pieces as well. So hopefully that back line, if the front line is struggling to score goals early on or find that, the back line can continue to hold firm. And then, I didn't even mention it, but Clint Irwin, he kind of came in not thinking, he wasn't like, hey, I'm coming in to be number 2. I mean, his mentality, and it should be for a goalkeeper, is always, I can come in and be the starter if I need to. Have you felt any of that? Like that there's pushing? I mean, there's competition there, that it's not just Danes to have, or even Danes to lose. And Stuart Kerr always does such a fabulous job with the goalkeepers.
Yeah, I think, Clint talked about kind of coming in and pushing Dane, but I think he also, at this stage of his career, and knowing that Dane is an all-star, and knowing that, he's kind of on the come up of his career, I think it's very much thought of as, hey, I'm here to push, I'm here to be ready, I'm here to be the veteran, but also knowing that, Dane is the number 1, and if everything is flowing for him and he's healthy, he's going to be the guy. So I think it's more of a depth piece in Clint, I believe, the guy that's always going to try to be ready and push him in training, but know that it's Dane's spot to have. And I think Dane appreciates that as well. We talked to him today, and obviously at this time last year, he was hearing the news that he wasn't going to be starting the start of the season, and was very, very frustrated by that, and felt like he had a good preseason, and Tyler Miller got the nod over him, and he doesn't have to worry about that. I think Dane knows that it's his spot, and if he keeps the level, it's his. I think getting Kamar Lawrence back, obviously he was away in Jamaica for a while. He's a veteran piece that they like it at left back. Right back is a little bit in flux. DJ Taylor has been dealing with a tendonitis issue, and Zarek Valentin has been kind of the main guy on the right side. Alan Benitez is kind of in the mix, kind of, sort of. I mean, you don't really see a lot of him. He was kind of a late summer transfer window addition that was on the cheap, and and kind of struggled defensively, and DJ Taylor kind of took over that spot. And I think, we talked to Boxy about it today, and just look at all the changes that have happened in the back line in the matter of a year, right? I think last year you're talking about Boxy with an entirely different back line around him, right? You have Dabasi on his left side, you have Chase Gasper on left back, you have Ramon Metaner at right back, and that's kind of what you pencil in going into the season. And all three of those guys are either completely out of the picture, not on the team, or on the long-term injured list. And you have three new pieces in front there. So it's obviously you want to have continuity, and that's what this club strives for, but long-term injuries and changes in health and all those things have really kind of caused the changes to be as in flux as they've been. One thing when it comes back to Mickey Tapias is kind of, I talked to Cesar Hernandez, who's with ESPN, about him, who follows Liga MX, and said that, Tapias really was great continuity player with the ball at his feet. Usually, you hear the defensive attributes first, and this is kind of the one that is mentioned more often when it comes to Tapias, is kind of his ability to be comfortable on the ball, to be able to connect, to be able to get the ball forward. He likes to play with speed. They said that's the number one thing in his game. He doesn't have kind of the body type of a center back. He's not as big as Boxall or Dabasi. So I wonder about how he'll be in the air. I think we've seen him be adequate there, but when we talk about this team and a lack of goal scoring, especially off the set pieces and aerial threats, this team has lacked that since Ike Opara has been around. And, I think you need somebody to kind of step up into that role to kind of dunk on people when need be, when the goals might not be coming an open play.
Yeah. And I think one of the things too, is when you talk about those changes, and I would assume that maybe it feels Boxall makes him feel a little bit more comfortable, is that you have a player like a Will Trapp, if he's healthy and if he's on the pitch, that can read the game so well. And I think Kervin Arriaga will read it even better this year if he's in that role in his second season, just understanding that chemistry and where to be and who's stepping, who's dropping, who's covering, as even if it's a Tapias is getting accustomed to this league, and as other things might be rotating around, that you have some comfort in the players that are in front of you in the back line. Because how many times have we seen in this league the importance, like a solid number 6 can be worth its weight in gold in helping out the back line, and then being that connector piece to find the 8 or the 10 or get the ball out wide or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Will Trapp is a player that is looking to have a bounce back year himself. I think he would be the first one to raise his hand and be like, last year wasn't good enough from his standard. I think he had a career high number of yellow cards. He dealt with suspension issues. I felt like, he would probably raise his hand and say, I can play better. I can be more of that rock that you mentioned. So it'll be important for him to be able to stay healthy. That was a little bit of an issue for him last year, and he kind of avoided kind of a serious scare with his leg. But yeah, I mean, when you have, like you said, when you have somebody that is as veteran savvy in front of Boxall and Tapias, that can provide a real comfort as you try to play out of the back.
Two things just to wrap up. One, is there anybody in particular that has really pleasantly surprised you or impressed you in your time? Because I know the team's been away a lot, but just the coverage that you have been able to do. And then also, any thoughts as you've sort of dug into the Western Conference of looking at this team really going to be good this year, that's maybe flying under the radar? I mean, we can't go LAFC because we all know what that is, but you know what I mean? Like somebody that's like, wow, this team's going to have a good year.
Yeah. I think you mentioned him earlier, but Cam Dunbar is a player that, just talking with players and talking with coaches, and there's been really kind of 2 sessions that they had where they had short-sided scrimmages, and Cam was probably the most threatening of all the players in those short-sided games. Just a little spark plug on the left wing, a little jitterbug, gets in the right places. Adrian has mentioned him as potential central kind of playmaking role as well. He's got 20 games under his belt with the Galaxy, so he's been in a spot where he has a little bit of experience in this league, and we chatted with him. He seems pretty mature and has his legs underneath him, has youth national team experience as well. So he's a guy that I think people they're expecting him to be probably a contributor off the bench, maybe that guy that can kind of chase the game and maybe grab a goal as you're trying to get back in it. So he's a guy that I think they're pleasantly surprised by and think he'll be part of the mix. As far as a team in the Western Conference that I think can kind of be on the come up and maybe surprise people, I think Sporting KC will have a bounce back year. I think they're going to be a much better team than they were last year. Obviously, that's not what Loons fans want to hear, just because of the rivalry aspect, quote unquote rivalry aspect that is out there with them. But I think that, it's going to be a crowded Western Conference, and you see SKC, who Minnesota, I think, has to play 3 times. I think that's how it goes. I think they're the one team that they have to play 3 times. Obviously, people in Minnesota will be like, oh, of course we play them 3 times. We always play them. But I think KC will be my pick. William Agato up top, I think, is a guy who, I think he had something like 8 or 10 goals in 1,000 minutes last year as he came over. That's my pick, SKC.
Yeah. I think we saw that firsthand, didn't we, as one of the last games of the season on the road when Minnesota United went to KC, and you saw Tommy in the middle and you saw Agata up top. And, that was even with still missing some of their key pieces, but those guys I think are going to be really good in their second year. So, and then, teams like Portland and Seattle, like they're not going to miss the playoffs again, they're not letting that happen regardless. And they're both, Seattle for sure getting some pieces back who had some injuries last season. So I think it's going to be the usual, the Western Conference craziness. Nashville goes back to the East. Now you get St. Louis in the mix. So Houston with a new coach. I mean, there's just all this stuff that it'll be interesting to see, how everything shakes out. But either way, I think it's going to be a pretty nuts 2023. And then you throw the Leagues Cup in there and everything else. So it's gonna be a good one. And we can say one thing now, and then we could be completely wrong, by the end of the season, and have more of that craziness, which is why we love sports.
Yeah, for sure. MLS's predictions came out this week, and they had Minnesota at 11th. And I asked Dane St. Clair about it today, and I was like, what do you think? How do you respond to this? And, he said something to the effect, let me just pull it up here. He's like, preseason predictions are a crapshoot anyway. I'd be impressed if any of them in any position gets them automatically correct, because no one knows with injuries, midseason additions, things like that. They put it out there for people to talk about, but I think even they know they wouldn't put money on it. So, it's one of those things where it's, especially in MLS, given the parity, given the fluctuations, and that's why, like you said, that's why we enjoy sports. Is it's fun to talk about. It's fun to throw out different variables and ideas and look at preseason form for what it's worth and try to gauge off that and wait for the games to come.
Yeah, we get to talk about it. They get to play it. It's, that's what makes it all fun. And we all sit on our couch and go, what the heck was that? So that's kind of the beauty and the nature of sports. So, well, thank you, Andy, for joining me. I know that haven't gotten to see you in person as much, so it's nice to catch up over Zoom and have this podcast. I'm sure I'll see you out at the training ground someday, but otherwise enjoy a couple more days here before the season gets going, and we'll chat soon.
Thanks for having me on, Kyndra.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining on another episode of Sound of the Loons, presented by Allina Health Orthopedics. And we'll catch you on the next one after game number 1 of the regular season.